They thought that throwing a black girl to hungry dogs would finally teach her fear. It turns out, the only ones who should have been afraid were the bullies themselves. Because while they sneered from above, Ayanna commanded those dogs, commands they'd spent years learning, in her own voice, not theirs. And for the next 60 seconds, those furious barks, that's right, they weren't for her anymore. They were for the idiots who had pushed her. This story is going to get even darker, more chaotic, and more compelling from here. So don't blink. The first Monday morning at Silver Ridge High always came with noise, doors slamming, sneakers hitting the hallway tiles, the low hum of gossip swirling in the air like static. But when Ayanna Brooks stepped through the front entrance, everything seemed to pause for half a second, as if the school itself was inhaling sharply. She walked with steady, measured steps, her black curls tied back, her uniform crisp, her face unreadable. Not shy, not scared, simply controlled. And in a place like Silver Ridge, control was enough to make you stand out. From the other side of the hallway, Carter Hale leaned against his locker, arms crossed, varsity jacket half-zipped, like he owned the oxygen supply in this building. Logan and Bryce flanked him, the usual formation of the school's most predictable trouble. The trio noticed the new girl instantly, not because she was loud or flashy, but because she barely looked at anyone at all. Carter narrowed his eyes. "Look at her," he muttered, a smirk twisting his mouth. "She thinks she's royalty or something." Logan snorted. "Or she's just stuck up." Bryce shrugged, but his gaze lingered longer than the others. "Nah, something's off about her. Look how she's watching everything." Because she was. Ayanna's eyes flicked left to right quick, assessing, watchful. Not scared, not confused, just aware. Hyper-aware. Her gaze swept over lockers, exits, crowds, the boys near the drinking fountain arguing, the teacher rushing with a pile of papers. She was mapping the environment like someone who'd been trained to, but to Carter, that quiet intensity felt like an insult. "Who walks in here like that?" he hissed, straightening up. "Like she's too good to even breathe the same air?" Ayanna didn't turn her head, but her eyes dark, unflinching, locked onto Carter for a split second. No flinch, no apology, no fear, just a cold, razor-sharp acknowledgement, and then she looked away, as if he wasn't worth her time. That was enough to make Carter's jaw tighten. "The hell was that?" he snapped. "She ignored you," Logan said. "Honestly? Respect." "Shut up," Carter growled. Ayanna reached her assigned locker, slipping off her backpack. She moved with quiet precision, her posture disciplined, her breathing steady. She opened the bag, and for a fraction of a second, something metallic glinted at the corner, just enough to catch Carter's eye from across the hall. "What is that?" he murmured, frowning. He pushed off the locker and walked closer, pretending to pass by casually. Logan and Bryce trailed behind him like shadows. As Carter approached, Ayanna sensed movement and briefly glanced over her shoulder. Her expression remained flat calm in a way that rubbed Carter the wrong way. He slowed down just enough to catch the patch, stitched onto the front pocket of her backpack. Black and gold. Clean lines. A shield-shaped emblem with bold letters. K9 Unit, Certified Trainer. Carter stopped mid-step. For a second, he thought it was fake. A sticker. A fashion accessory. Some kind of edgy dog-lover patch. But no, this one looked real. The stitching, the texture, the official seal, it wasn't something you bought for fun on the internet. Logan noticed Carter staring. "Is that a police thing?" Bryce raised an eyebrow. "Dude, what kind of high school girl walks around with a real K9 badge?" Ayanna closed her locker with a firm click, almost as if she knew exactly what Carter had seen. She didn't address them. She didn't explain. She just walked away, silent, composed, unbothered, and somehow, that silence insulted Carter more than words ever could. His smirk returned, darker this time. "All right," he muttered under his breath. "Let's see who she really thinks she is." Ayanna turned a corner, disappearing into the crowd. Carter's eyes gleamed with challenge, and from that moment on, he decided he would expose whatever truth the new girl was hiding. The cafeteria at Silver Ridge roared like a stadium at lunchtime, trays clattering, chairs scraping, conversations blending into one chaotic hum. But as Ayanna stepped inside with her lunch, the noise seemed to shift, bending in subtle waves around her presence. She didn't look left or right. She simply scanned the room once, quietly, like she was calculating distances rather than searching for a place to sit. Mila, a soft-spoken girl from Ayanna's homeroom, waved her over. "You can sit with me," she said hesitantly. Ayanna nodded, offering a polite, almost guarded smile before sitting down. That tiny display of normalcy didn't last long. From the far table, the table everyone avoided, unless they wanted trouble, Carter spotted her. His smirk returned instantly. "There she is," he said, lifting his chin. "Little Miss Secret Agent." Logan laughed. "Bro, relax. She's literally eating a sandwich." "Yeah," Bryce added, "and ignoring you again." That was the trigger. Carter's ego never survived being ignored twice. He grabbed his metal spoon and started tapping it rhythmically against his water bottle. Clang, clang, clang. The sound sliced through the cafeteria noise like a blade. Heads turned. Students went silent one by one, knowing that whenever Carter demanded attention, chaos usually followed. Ayanna didn't look up. That alone made Carter slam the spoon harder. "Hey!" he called loudly, voice dripping mockery. "Ayanna, right? Our new K9 queen?" Mila stiffened beside her. "You can just ignore them," she whispered. "I know," Ayanna murmured calmly, taking a bite of her sandwich. But Carter wasn't done. "Yo, new girl," he shouted again. "Since you love dogs so much, should we bring you some kibble? Maybe a chew toy? Or do you need a collar first?" Laughter erupted around the room. Logan cracked up. Bryce tried to hide his grin but failed. Ayanna didn't flinch. Her silence wasn't fear, it was precision. Mila noticed the way her jaw remained relaxed, the way her eyes stayed steady. This wasn't someone who shut down. This was someone who chose restraint deliberately, and that restraint infuriated Carter. "What? You too good to answer?" he taunted. "Or is playing with dogs more your thing?" Ayanna slowly placed her sandwich down, wiped her fingers with a napkin, and looked up not at Carter, but past him, through him, like he was background noise. That expression, calm, cutting, unbothered, lit a fuse inside him. "Oh, hell no," Carter muttered, pushing away from the table. "She's not walking around with that attitude." He stormed across the cafeteria, Logan and Bryce following behind like eager hyenas. Mila stood up. "Leave her alone," she protested. But Carter brushed past her. He reached out and snatched Ayanna's backpack right off the bench. Ayanna reacted instantly, her hand shot forward to grab the strap. But Carter yanked harder, pulling it out of her reach. For a moment, their eyes locked, his filled with challenge, hers with a cold warning. He flipped the bag open. "Let's see what secrets our dog trainer's hiding." He rummaged inside pencils, a notebook, some folded clothes. Then he froze. His fingers brushed a laminated card in a black sleeve. He pulled it out slowly. A golden emblem shone under the cafeteria lights. National K9 Trainer Certification Level 3. Authorization, Real-World Operations. Name, Ayanna, Brooks. The cafeteria gasped. Logan blinked. "Dude, that looks real." Bryce frowned. "Why would she have that? She's like 16. Carter barked a laugh loud, mocking, defensive. "Oh, come on. This is fake as hell. Anyone can print this stuff online." He waved the card dramatically. "Nice try, Ayanna. Next time get a better font." Ayanna's face remained unreadable. She didn't justify, didn't defend, didn't even blink. She simply said, "Give me my bag back." The calmness in her voice felt like a threat. Carter smirked. "Oh, I will, after I see if you're really what you pretend to be." He leaned closer, eyes sharp with malicious curiosity, and Carter decided to verify the truth in a far more brutal way. The boys' locker room of the Silver Ridge basketball team always smelled like sweat, rubber soles, and cheap body spray an environment perfectly suited for bad decisions. Metal lockers clanged shut as Carter stomped inside, the fury from lunch still simmering like acid in his chest. Logan and Bryce followed closely, exchanging uneasy glances. Carter swung his fist against a locker door with a metallic bang. "I'm done with her," he snapped. "She thinks she can walk around here acting untouchable? Nah, someone needs to humble her." Bryce leaned against the bench. "Dude, you already embarrassed her in the cafeteria." Carter spun around sharply. "Embarrassed?" She didn't even react. Didn't even break eye contact. She looked at me like I was the joke. Logan shrugged, though there was tension in his shoulders. "She's weird. That's all." "No," Carter growled. "She's hiding something, and I want to know what." He paced back and forth in front of the lockers, running a hand through his hair. Then, as if struck by an idea too thrilling to resist, he halted. "You know the old rooftop?" he asked slowly. Bryce frowned. "The one next to the K9 training yard?" "Exactly." Carter's eyes gleamed with reckless excitement. "Nobody goes up there. It's out of range of cameras. And we can see everything, especially the dogs." Logan stiffened. "You're not thinking—" "I'm thinking," Carter interrupted, "that if she wants to pretend she's some elite dog trainer, let's see how she handles being up close with 3 hungry K9s. Bryce's jaw dropped. "Dude, that's messed up. Relax," Carter scoffed. "We're not throwing her into anything. Just scaring her, making her drop the act." But the way his voice darkened suggested even he didn't believe his own words. Logan hesitated, chewing on the inside of his cheek. "Carter, there's something you don't know." Carter stopped pacing. "What?" Logan swallowed. "Yesterday, after last period, I was walking down the back hallway by the gym. She was outside by the fence, alone, on her phone. And, Logan glanced at Bryce, then back at Carter. She wasn't talking like some scared new girl. Her voice was commanding, like an officer talking to a subordinate. Carter's eyebrows lifted. "She used German," Logan continued. "Short words. Sharp. I don't speak the language, but I've heard enough dog training videos to recognize the tone. She was giving orders, real orders." Bryce sat up straighter. "German? Like K9 commands?" "Yeah," Logan replied. "Exactly like that." The locker room went silent. Carter narrowed his eyes, absorbing the information. For a moment, doubt flickered, but only for a moment. Then it twisted into something darker, fueled by pride and insecurity. "So what?" Carter scoffed. "She probably memorized some YouTube videos to make her fake badge look real." Logan shook his head. "No, man. It wasn't some amateur impression. It sounded professional. Like she does it every day." Carter's lips curled into a mocking smile. "Then all the more reason to expose her." Bryce frowned. "Carter, this is getting out of hand. What if she's legit? What if the dogs actually listen to her?" Carter stepped forward, eyes blazing. "That's exactly why we're doing this. To prove she's nothing but a wannabe. A performer. A liar." Logan and Bryce exchanged worried glances. Something in Carter had shifted. This wasn't just about ego anymore. It was an obsession. Bryce tried one more time. "Bro, maybe leave it alone." "No," Carter said, voice low and final. "We're taking her to that rooftop. After school. Just the 4 of us." He grabbed his backpack and swung it over his shoulder. "She wants to play expert," he muttered. "Let's see how good her act is when those dogs are barking in her face." He walked toward the locker room exit, determination burning like wildfire. And the more Logan revealed, the more desperate Carter became to prove Ayanna was nothing but a cheap actress. The sun was ruthless that afternoon, hanging above Building B like a burning spotlight. The rooftop was mostly empty, just cracked concrete, rusted fences, and the distant sound of K9 dogs barking from the training yard below. The wind whipped across the open space, tugging at loose debris and carrying the sharp scent of metal and asphalt. Ayanna stepped out of her last class, holding her books against her chest. When she felt the shift, the subtle pressure of footsteps closing in behind her, before she could turn, Carter blocked her path, Logan and Bryce flanking him like shadows. Going somewhere? Carter asked, voice dripping arrogance. Ayanna kept her tone calm. Step aside. Sure, Carter said with a smirk, but after a little field trip, Logan grabbed her arm. Ayanna twisted, nearly slipping free, but Bryce seized her backpack strap, yanking her backward. She lost balance for a second, just long enough for Carter to shove her forward. Let go, she snapped, struggling against their grip. Relax, Carter said mockingly. We're just gonna have a conversation. Private. Just us. And a nice view. No, Ayanna said sharply. I'm not going anywhere with you. But they didn't give her a choice. Logan pushed her from behind while Bryce held her arm, and Carter led the way up the back stairwell of Building B. The narrow hallway echoed with the harsh rhythm of their footsteps, the metallic clang of Logan kicking open the rooftop door. The moment they stepped outside, the wind hit them hard. Ayanna stumbled, catching herself on the railing. Carter grinned. Welcome to the VIP tour. Bryce took out his phone, already recording. Ayanna's chest rose and fell controlled, calculated. She wasn't panicking, even though three boys towered over her, their intentions anything but harmless. Start talking, Carter ordered. Who are you trying to fool with that fake K9 stuff? Ayanna didn't answer. Carter stepped closer. You think you're better than us? Walking around like you're some trained operative? Ayanna stayed silent. That angered him. Logan lifted the phone for a better angle while Bryce circled around her. Carter leaned in, his voice low and venomous. Say something! Ayanna tightened her jaw but still refused to respond. Carter scoffed. Fine. Let's see how tough you are. He shoved her hard. Ayanna hit the rooftop floor, palms scraping against the rough concrete. The wind carried the boys' laughter across the open sky. Mila's warning voice echoed in her mind. Ignore them. They're not worth it. But ignoring wasn't an option anymore. Ayanna pushed herself up, brushing dust off her uniform. The boys expected tears, fear, maybe a plea for mercy. What they got instead was Ayanna, standing tall, her eyes colder than the wind whipping across the rooftop. That's enough, she said. Carter stepped forward again. Or what? Ayanna met his stare, unblinking. And then she spoke, each word crisp, steady, almost haunting. You don't know what you're doing. Logan froze. A chill ran down his spine, cutting through the heat of the sun. Her voice wasn't desperate, it was warning. A warning that felt too real, too calm, too confident. Bryce swallowed hard. Carter, maybe we should… No. Carter's voice cracked with ego and irritation. She's bluffing, but Ayanna didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't break eye contact. Carter raised his phone, now recording her too. Say that again for the camera. Ayanna didn't move, didn't raise her voice. She simply repeated, softer but sharper, You don't know what you're doing. For the first time, Logan stepped back, unease creeping into his expression. But Carter let out a short, humorless laugh. Please, he sneered. That's just an empty threat, and I'm going to prove it. He thought it was nothing but a hollow warning. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the rooftop, turning the concrete beneath their feet into a scorching sheet of heat. The wind, once just a whisper, now howled around the metal railing like it sensed what was about to happen. Below the rooftop stretched the fenced-off K9 training yard, an expanse of gravel, metal cages, and three restless dogs pacing in tight circles, barking sharply as if reacting to an unseen threat. Ayanna stood near the edge, her back inches from the low barrier. Carter stepped closer, the thrill of dominance buzzing under his skin like electricity. Logan and Bryce hovered near him, both filming now, their nervous laughter clashing with the angry barks echoing from below. Last chance, Carter taunted, grabbing Ayanna's collar sharply. Drop the act. Ayanna stared at him with the same chilling stillness she'd shown all day. There was no fear in her eyes, only recognition, and something colder disappointment. Carter, she said quietly, you're about to cross a line you can't take back. He laughed. Oh, I crossed it the second you walked in here acting like a damn robot. Logan shifted uncomfortably. Dude, Maybe that's enough. She's literally on the edge. But Carter didn't hear him. Or he didn't care. He shoved Ayanna backward. She stumbled, her heel hitting the rooftop ledge. Behind her, the drop yawned open 10 feet down into the training yard, where the 3 K9 dogs erupted into frenzied barking. Sensing danger, claws scraping violently against the gravel. Ayanna's breath hitched, but only for a moment. Carter stepped closer, raising his voice over the wind. "You want to play trainer?" he sneered. "Let's see you train them." Logan grabbed Carter's sleeve. "Man, stop. This feels wrong." Carter shook him off violently. "Shut up. She's been bluffing since day one." Ayanna inhaled slowly. Her eyes flicked once toward the dogs. Chaos, Diesel, and Vector, the 3 most aggressive trainees in the unit. Chaos was practically climbing the fence wall, baring his teeth in a furious snarl. They recognized her. Carter didn't notice. He leaned in, pushing harder. "You don't look so tough now, do you?" Ayanna met his stare one last time. "Don't do this." Carter grinned. Then he shoved her, hard. Ayanna's feet left the rooftop. Logan shouted. Bryce cursed. The camera wobbled violently as she tumbled backward through open air, her body twisting, hair whipping upward from the force of the fall. The barking below turned primal, rapid, vicious, deafening. For a split second, everything slowed. Ayanna's heart slammed against her ribs. The ground rushed toward her, but her face didn't contort in fear. It focused, her lungs tightened, and from deep within her chest, she released a command sharp, explosive, and delivered with perfect cadence. "Oz! Blibe!" Her voice cut through the air like a blade. The effect was immediate. Below, 3 K9 dogs screeched to a halt mid-bark, their bodies freezing in rigid obedience. Chaos stopped so abruptly dust exploded around him. Diesel dropped into a stiff sit. Vector locked his posture, ears pinned, eyes wide. Ayanna hit the ground, rolling with trained precision to absorb the impact. She landed on gravel, breath forced from her lungs but consciousness fully intact. On the rooftop above, Carter leaned over the ledge, eyes wide in disbelief. "What the what?" did she just yell? Logan stared downward, voice shaking. "Dude, that sounded real." Bryce swallowed. They stopped. All of them. But Carter? Carter just laughed high, nervous, refusing to accept what he'd seen. "No way," he scoffed. "No way some gibberish shouting saved her. She probably just got lucky." He backed away from the edge, shaking his head, refusing the truth, creeping under his skin. Carter laughed, convinced a few strange foreign words could never save her. Ayanna's body hit the gravel hard, but she moved exactly as she'd been trained to, rolling into the impact. Shoulder first, letting the momentum carry her instead of crush her. Dust exploded around her in a cloud, tiny rocks scraping her skin. Her breath stuttered, but her mind stayed unnervingly clear. Above her, the echoes of the boys' shouts faded into silence. Below, 3 K9 dogs, Chaos, Diesel, and Vector, stood frozen like statues carved from muscle and instinct. Just seconds earlier, they had been pure aggression. Teeth bared, bodies tight with adrenaline, snarls ripping through the training yard as they sensed a human falling into their territory. But the moment Ayanna shouted the command midair, everything changed. Chaos, the most unpredictable of the trio, shifted first. His growl choked off in his throat, his ears snapped forward, and he lowered into a rigid sit, tail stiff, pupils dilated with instant recognition. Diesel followed next, dropping effortlessly into perfect obedience, head slightly lowered, awaiting further instruction. Vector, usually the slowest to respond, stood with military stillness, chest puffed, chin level. They were no longer predators. They were soldiers awaiting their commander. Ayanna pushed herself onto her knees, wincing at the sting in her palms and shoulder. She blinked away dust and, steadying her breath, looked up to find 3 pairs of disciplined eyes locked onto her like laser sights. She whispered, "Good boys. Good." Chaos's ears twitched at the familiar tone, firm yet warm, authoritative yet affectionate. She rose slowly to her feet. The dogs didn't move an inch. The transformation was so absolute, so immediate, so precise, that it bordered on unnatural. Moments ago, they had been ready to tear apart anything within reach. Now they looked like they'd been waiting for her all day. Ayana stepped toward them, her posture relaxed but commanding. Gravel crunched softly under her shoes. The wind carried the faint scent of metal and sand, swirling through her hair. Chaos was the first to react. He lowered himself not into a sit this time, but into something deeper. He folded both front legs, lower belly touching the ground. Then he dipped his head. Low. A gesture of submission. Not fear, not intimidation. Respect. And not just any respect. This was a gesture reserved only for the highest-ranking handlers, those the dogs recognized as alphas, as leaders, as protectors in the field. Ayana froze for a breath, her chest tightening with something sharp and unspoken. It had been months since she'd trained with Chaos. She wasn't sure he would remember her scent, her voice, her rhythm. But he did. All three did. Vector gave a short, soft whine, an almost emotional sound, one that only surfaced when a K9 reunited with someone they trusted deeply. Ayana reached down, resting her hand on Chaos's head. His body trembled with excitement, the violent energy from before melting into a low, rhythmic pant. "That's right," she murmured. "It's me." Above her, the rooftop railing creaked as someone leaned over. She didn't need to look to know. The boys were watching, frozen, speechless, horrified. Ayana straightened, turning her gaze upward. Carter's face peeked over the ledge, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Bryce stood stiff as a statue, phone dangling uselessly from his hand. Logan's knuckles were white, gripping the railing like he might collapse if he let go. Their plan had turned to dust in their hands. Ayana didn't smile, didn't smirk, didn't claim victory. She simply existed in the moment, calm, powerful, undeniable. The wind blew her braids gently across her shoulder as the three canine dogs formed a protective triangle around her, their bodies angled outward, guarding her. It was no longer prey versus predator. It was commander versus fools. Ayana's voice rose, steady and firm. "Stay." All three dogs obeyed instantly. Silence filled the training yard, the kind of silence that crushes arrogance and exposes truth. The group of bullies on the rooftop stood in stunned, breathless disbelief. The training yard felt different now, charged, humming with tension that crackled in the air like static before a storm. Ayana stood at the center of the gravel field, her uniform dusty, one knee scraped, hair tousled by the wind. But her posture, perfectly upright, perfectly controlled, perfectly in command. Chaos, Diesel, and Vector surrounded her in a tight formation, 3K9 powerhouses standing like a trained guard unit. Their bodies faced outward, muscles taut, eyes scanning for threats. They were no longer reacting to instinct. They were responding to her. Ayana lifted her chin slowly, gaze sliding upward toward the rooftop ledge. Carter, Logan, and Bryce stared down like they'd just watched a ghost walk straight out of a grave. Their faces were pale from shock, and Carter's grip on the railing trembled ever so slightly. Not that he would ever admit it. Ayana didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The wind carried her words upward with icy clarity. "You boys like danger, so I'll play along." Her tone wasn't loud, but it sliced through the air like a scalpel. Precise, cold, and deliberate. It wasn't anger. It was a promise, a warning disguised as calm. Logan's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. Bryce shifted backward from the ledge, gripping his phone like a lifeline. Carter tried to push a smirk onto his face, but it faltered. "Oh yeah?" he shouted down, voice slightly cracked. "What are you gonna do, sick the dogs on us?" Ayana didn't blink. She raised her hand slightly, just a subtle gesture, barely more than a flick of her wrist. Chaos snapped to attention instantly. Diesel stiffened, ears pricked. Vector took a step forward, eyes blazing. Even from the rooftop, the boys felt that shift. Something feral and intelligent radiated from the dogs. Something dangerous, disciplined, and absolute. Ayana let the moment stretch. Let their fear sink in. Let the truth settle like heavy smoke. Then she gave a single command, Umringen. Surround. Her voice wasn't loud, but it echoed like thunder. The dogs responded instantly. Chaos sprinted left, circling the building's perimeter with startling speed. Diesel bolted to the right, disappearing behind a storage shed. Vector moved straight toward the main exit gate, posture rigid and alert. The boys watched in frozen horror. What are they doing?" Bryce whispered. Ayanna didn't stop watching the rooftop. "They're making sure," she said calmly. "You don't leave," Logan gasped. "Carter, they're surrounding the building." "Shut up," Carter snapped, but his voice shook. "They're just dogs. They can't trap us." Ayanna raised one eyebrow, unimpressed. The barks began. Not random, not chaotic, strategic. Controlled bursts from 3 angles. Warnings, territory claims, commands to the pack. Ayanna clasped her hands behind her back, relaxed, authoritative, terrifyingly at ease. "You thought pushing me off a roof was a joke," she said, still looking up. "But now? Now you're dealing with animals that don't joke." Logan grabbed Carter's arm. "We need to go. Now." "Go where?" Bryce hissed. "The dogs are literally blocking every exit." Carter stared down at Ayanna, finally seeing not a new girl, not a target, not a victim, but something else entirely. Something powerful, something trained, something he never should have provoked. Ayanna tilted her head faintly, studying their panic like a scientist observing a predictable reaction. "Don't worry," she said softly. "They won't touch you." Relief flickered through the boys until she added, "Unless I tell them to." Carter froze. For the first time, fear crept into his expression, real fear, heavy enough to override ego. He stepped away from the ledge, heart pounding, palms sweating, breath short. A cold realization spread through his body like ice. Carter was beginning to understand something was horribly, dangerously wrong. The training yard was still buzzing with tension, gravel settling from the dog's movement, wind rattling the chain-link fences, the sun sharp against the metal kennels. Ayanna stood alone in the center, surrounded by 3 disciplined K9s guarding her like a living fortress. She reached slowly into her pocket, her fingers curled around her phone. No tremble, no panic, just controlled intent. Above her, Carter, Logan, and Bryce were still trapped on the rooftop, the dogs encircling the building like tactical units awaiting orders. Their panicked voices drifted faintly on the wind, but Ayanna paid them no attention. She unlocked her phone with a swipe, dialed a number from memory, and lifted it to her ear. The line clicked almost immediately. A deep, gravelly voice answered, stern, authoritative, unmistakably military. "Major Henderson speaking." Ayanna exhaled once, steady and professional. "This is Ayanna Brooks reporting from Silver Ridge High." A pause. The tone on the other end shifted instantly, alert, sharpened. "Brooks, you're supposed to be off duty. What's going on?" Ayanna's voice remained calm, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. "I've been attacked by 3 students. They forcibly detained me, brought me to a rooftop, then shoved me off the edge." Major Henderson swore under his breath. "Are you injured?" "No, sir," she replied. "I handled the landing." "And the dogs?" Ayanna glanced around. Chaos was stationed near the fence, eyes locked on the building. Diesel paced slowly near the side gate, muscles coiled, awaiting further commands. Vector stood tall beside her like a sentinel carved from stone. "They responded to command immediately," she said. "I have them securing the perimeter of the building so the suspects can't escape." There was complete silence on the line for a moment, heavy, stretched thin with unspoken calculation. Then Major Henderson's voice dropped into a tone Ayanna hadn't heard in months, one reserved only for active field recognition. "Outstanding work, Lieutenant Brooks." Ayanna's jaw tightened. "Sir," she corrected quietly, "I'm not a lieutenant anymore. I'm a student right now." Another pause. Then came the plot twist delivered with absolute conviction. "You will always be Lieutenant Brooks, the youngest operational K9 unit leader this country has ever had. That title doesn't vanish because you change schools." Ayanna closed her eyes for a second, letting the words wash over her. she hadn't wanted anyone here to know. Not students, not teachers, not anyone. She wanted a clean slate, a life without sirens, missions, or the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. But that choice had been taken from her today. "Understood, sir," she said softly. Major Henderson's voice hardened. "Send me the names of the boys." Ayanna glanced toward the rooftop. Carter was pacing like a caged animal. Logan looked ready to cry. Bryce was clutching his phone in terror, as if it could somehow save him. Carter Hale, Logan Pierce, Bryce Tanner. Major Henderson repeated the names slowly. Hale, Pierce, Tanner. Copy. Footsteps and radio chatter echoed faintly behind him. Ayanna knew that sound well. The K-9 command van warming up. Officers grabbing gear. A unit mobilizing. She didn't need to ask. He was already coming. "Stay where you are, Brooks," he ordered. "Maintain control of the dogs, keep the suspects contained, and don't engage further." "Yes, sir." "And Ayanna?" "Yes?" His voice softened, just barely. "You did the right thing calling me." Ayanna swallowed hard. "Thank you, sir." The line clicked off. She lowered her phone and slipped it back into her pocket, her body composed, her expression carved from ice. Above her, the boys watched helplessly from the rooftop. Ayanna raised her head, meeting their horrified, shrinking gazes. In the distance, faint but growing louder, came the wail of approaching sirens. And Major Henderson was on his way right now. The sirens grew louder as the police convoy rolled into Silver Ridge, high lights flashing, engines rumbling, radios crackling. Students flooded the courtyard in waves, drawn by the chaos, whispers buzzing like swarming insects. Ayanna stepped out from the K-9 training yard, flanked by Chaos, Diesel, and Vector. The dogs walked beside her with perfect discipline, forming a protective triangle. Students parted instinctively, creating a path as if she were royalty or something even more untouchable. Then the command van door slammed open. Major Henderson emerged, a massive man in a tactical vest, his gray-streaked beard and cold eyes radiating authority so intense that even teachers shrank back. His boots hit the pavement with heavy, deliberate thuds. When he saw Ayanna, his posture shifted into a sharp salute, one that made jaws drop all around the courtyard. "Lieutenant Brooks," he announced, voice booming. "Stand by." Ayanna nodded once, crisp and professional. Whispers exploded. "She's a lieutenant? No way, she's 16. Is this real? Dude, the K-9 chief is saluting her. What the hell?" Henderson turned toward the stairwell, leading up to the rooftop, where Carter, Logan, and Bryce were being escorted down by 2 officers. The boys looked like ghosts, shaking, hollow-eyed, drained of color. Carter kept trying to keep a straight face, but fear clung to him like sweat. The officers pushed them forward. Henderson faced the crowd. "Before we proceed," he said, "the student body deserves to see exactly what happened today." A large portable display screen flickered to life. One of the officers had already connected Bryce's phone. The shaky rooftop footage began playing. The crowd watched in horrified silence as the video showed. Carter grabbing Ayanna, Logan and Bryce helping restrain her. Carter dragging her to the edge, Ayanna warning them. And finally, Carter, shoving her off the rooftop. Gasps rippled through the courtyard. Several students covered their mouths. A teacher stumbled back, horrified. Mila burst into tears. Carter's face went scarlet, then sickly pale. "That's attempted murder," someone whispered. "But the dogs, how did they stop? No way she survived that without—" When the video ended, the silence felt heavy enough to crush stone. Major Henderson stepped forward. "For the record," he said, "Lieutenant Ayanna Brooks executed a controlled fall and de-escalation using K-9 operational commands. Her actions were professional, restrained, and entirely defensive." Another wave of shock hit the crowd. Carter's voice cracked. "She's lying. She faked all of it." Henderson cut him off, with a glare that could silence a riot. "Hale, you pushed a minor off a building. There is no defending that." Logan trembled violently, wiping tears from his cheeks with shaking hands. I didn't want to. He made us, he shouted, pointing at Carter. He planned everything. He said she deserved it. He said she acted better than us and Logan broke down into sobs right there in front of everyone. Bryce buried his face in his hands, mumbling, "It got out of control. We didn't think she'd actually—" The courtyard murmured, shocked by the confession. Carter lunged forward, rage overpowering his fear. "Stop talking. They're lying. They're trying to set me up." Two officers grabbed Carter, restraining him. Henderson turned to Ayanna. "Do you wish to make a statement?" Ayanna simply shook her head. "No, sir." The video speaks for itself. Students stared at her with a mix of awe and disbelief. She didn't revel in the moment. She didn't smile. She wasn't here to embarrass them. She was here because they chose violence. Henderson nodded to the officers. "Take them in, all three," Carter shouted. Logan sobbed harder. Bryce stumbled as he was pushed forward. But as the boys were escorted away, Henderson spoke again, his tone darker than before. "And the real consequences haven't even begun." A shiver passed through the crowd, because the punishment was only getting started. The conference room of Silver Ridge High was supposed to be a place for routine meetings, parent-teacher conferences, curriculum discussions, the occasional disciplinary talk. But today, it felt more like a tribunal. The air was thick and unmoving, heavy with accusation and fear. Ayanna sat at one end of the long table, posture straight, hands folded neatly. Major Henderson stood behind her like a stone pillar, arms crossed, tactical aura filling every inch of the space. Across from them sat Principal Green and two assistant administrators, both visibly overwhelmed. The door opened with a loud bang. Carter's father marched in first, a man with slicked-back hair, an expensive suit, and the self-confidence of someone who'd never been told no. His wife followed, lips pursed in icy disapproval. Logan's and Bryce's parents entered next, nervous, anxious, whispering frantically, but Carter's father spoke before anyone could breathe. "This is outrageous," he snapped, pointing a finger toward Ayanna. "Our son is being treated like a criminal because of her?" Principal Green cleared his throat. "Mr. Hale, the video. The video shows a misunderstanding," Mr. Hale interrupted. "Teenagers, roughhousing. That girl should have known better than to provoke them." Mrs. Hale chimed in, her voice dripping venom. "Exactly. Look at her acting all stoic. It's obvious she wanted attention. Some girls will do anything to make boys react." Ayanna stayed still. Henderson's jaw tightened. Logan's mother whispered, horrified. She was thrown off a roof. She could have died. But Carter's father scoffed. "Oh, please." She landed on her feet. "Obviously, she's trained in whatever this is. It looks like she staged the whole thing." Ayanna's eyes lifted slightly, calm, sharp, lethal. "Staged?" Henderson growled. "Your son shoved a minor off a building." Mr. Hale crossed his arms smugly. "And she didn't break a bone, did she? That alone tells me she's been trained to manipulate situations. She probably goaded them." Principal Green rubbed his temples in exhaustion. "Mr. Hale, the school will not tolerate victim blaming." But he cut in again. "She put my son at risk. That girl needs discipline. She needs to learn her place." Silence dropped like a guillotine. Ayanna said nothing. She didn't need to. Because Major Henderson stepped forward, placing a thick folder on the table with a heavy thud. His voice was low, controlled, dangerously controlled. "Mr. Hale, before you accuse my lieutenant of manipulation, perhaps you should understand exactly who she is." Mr. Hale snorted. "Lieutenant, don't be absurd. She's a teenager." Henderson flipped open the folder. Inside were documents stamped with federal seals, photos of Ayanna in full tactical gear, standing beside military-trained dogs, her posture commanding and alert. He slid the first page across the table. "This," Henderson said, "is Ayanna Brooks, certified K-9 operational trainer, youngest ever admitted into the Federal Juvenile Tactical Program, responsible for training dogs used in real field operations. She's not performing. She's not pretending." She is the reason dozens of officers have returned home alive. The room went dead silent. Even Mr. Hale stopped breathing. Green adjusted his glasses, stunned. I had no idea she held such credentials. You weren't supposed to, Henderson replied. She requested anonymity to have a normal academic year, something your sons destroyed. Mrs. Hale's voice trembled. But she's just a child. Henderson's stare hardened. She's a soldier. Logan's mother put her hand over her mouth, tears welling. Bryce's father closed his eyes in shame. But Carter's father forced out one last desperate argument. So what? That doesn't excuse her provoking. She warned them twice. Henderson cut in coldly. Your son ignored both warnings, and then he tried to kill her. No one spoke. Principal Green finally straightened his posture. Well, with this information and the severity of the assault, the school has no choice. He looked each parent in the eye, one by one. The administration must take decisive action, because Silver Ridge had no option but to deliver a punishment severe enough to match the crime. The school resource officer's office, usually a quiet corner of Silver Ridge High where kids got warnings for vaping or skipped detentions, had never held this much weight. Today, it felt like a federal command center. Radios buzzed. Officers moved with purpose. The atmosphere was tense enough to make even the walls feel nervous. Carter, Logan, and Bryce sat on a metal bench along the back wall, their hands cuffed, their faces pale. Hours had passed since the rooftop incident, but none of them had recovered from the shock. Their eyes flicked anxiously between each officer who walked by, each sealed folder, each whispered exchange. Major Henderson stood near the central desk, speaking with the school's on-duty officer and a federal liaison. Ayanna remained outside the office, seated calmly in a chair, no cuffs, no accusations, no fear, just steady control. And that alone made Carter tremble with rage and dread. The resource officer, Lieutenant Marks, turned to the boys, his voice clipped and official. You three are being processed under Section 18 to 210, aggravated assault with intent to cause bodily harm to a minor. Because the victim is a registered federal juvenile operative, your case qualifies for federal review. Bryce's jaw dropped. Federal? Like prison federal? Logan burst into tears again, chest heaving. We didn't mean to kill her, Carter said. It was just a scare. Carter barked, Shut up, Logan. But this time, Logan didn't listen. He sobbed harder, shaking his cuffed hands. You pushed her. You told us to help you. You said she deserved it. The officers exchanged glances. Every word was being recorded. Bryce swallowed, trembling so hard his shoulders shook. We didn't want to, Carter said. She was faking everything. Carter said the dogs wouldn't attack. Carter snapped. Shut your mouths, both of you. Lieutenant Marks slammed his hand on the desk. That's enough. Silence fell instantly. Major Henderson stepped forward, eyes cold, expression unreadable. Your actions weren't a prank. They were premeditated. You coordinated. You restrained her. You transported her against her will. And then you shoved her off a rooftop. That is felony-level intent. Bryce's knees buckled, and he slid halfway off the bench before an officer hauled him upright. Logan whispered, We're going to jail. Oh, God. We're actually going to jail. Carter glared at them both with venom. You idiots are ruining everything. Mark stepped closer. No, Carter. You ruined everything. They're just finally telling the truth. Another officer entered carrying 3 folders, one for each boy. He handed them to Marks. These are their case files. Juvenile Division has approved transfer. Carter felt the world tilt. Transfer? Transfer to where? Marks met his gaze without a shred of sympathy. To the County Juvenile Detention Center until your formal federal hearing. Bryce collapsed into sobs. Logan curled into himself. Carter went still, dead still. No, he whispered. My dad will fix this. He'll get lawyers. He'll get Henderson cut him off. Your father's influence means nothing here. Federal charges don't bend to money. Carter shook his head violently. No, this isn't happening. We're kids. We didn't sign up for— You signed up the moment you grabbed Ayanna, Henderson said. Actions have consequences, even for kids. Two officers stepped forward. Carter Hale, Logan Pierce, Bryce Tanner, you are hereby placed into federal juvenile custody pending further review. Stand up! Logan nearly fainted. Bryce begged. Carter tried to pull away, but the metal cuffs clanged against the bench as officers forced him up. The boys were escorted out of the office, their steps clumsy, their faces streaked with panic. The hallway outside had grown crowded, students whispering, teachers staring, phones quietly recording. Silver Ridge High was buzzing like a shaken hive. Voices spread rapidly. Carter's going to juvie? They said federal? Did you see the video? He shoved her like she was nothing. Ayanna didn't interact. She simply rose from her chair, back straight, eyes steady, watching the boys being led through the crowd. Not with satisfaction, not with triumph, with quiet, unbroken resolve. Major Henderson nodded at her. We're done here, Lieutenant. But Ayanna's gaze lingered on the hallway ahead, where students parted around her like she was untouchable. Because something inside her wasn't finished, something important. And the entire school began whispering, while Ayanna prepared for one final lesson. The auditorium at Silver Ridge High had never been this full. Every seat was taken, every aisle crowded. Students packed themselves shoulder to shoulder, teachers stood along the walls, and whispers rippled across the room like nervous electricity. The stage lights glowed against the heavy velvet curtains, casting long shadows across the polished floor. In the center of the stage stood a single podium, and behind it, Ayanna Brooks. She wasn't in uniform. She wasn't flanked by K-9 officers or surrounded by dogs. She wore the same school outfit as every other student. Navy skirt, white shirt, blazer. Somehow, she still radiated authority, stillness, power, the kind of presence that made people instinctively sit straighter. Principal Green cleared his throat at the microphone. Students, after the events of this week, we felt it was important to address the issues at the heart of what happened: racism, bullying, and the consequences of violence. He stepped aside, and no one is more qualified to speak on that than Ayanna Brooks. A murmur sighed through the room. Ayanna stepped forward. She didn't tap the mic. She didn't adjust her papers. She didn't posture. She simply looked out at hundreds of eyes staring back at her, curious, ashamed, intimidated. Then she began. When I came to Silver Ridge, she said, voice steady and cutting through the room like a blade, I wanted to disappear. The crowd stilled. I wanted to blend in. I wanted to forget my training, forget the missions, forget the noise and danger and responsibility. Her gaze swept the front rows. I wanted to be a kid. A few students lowered their eyes, but this school didn't let me be invisible. It didn't let me be safe. Her tone sharpened. It saw my skin, my silence, my differences, and it used them as targets. A hush fell so complete, you could hear someone breathing in the fifth row. People think bullying starts with fists, Ayanna said. It doesn't. It starts with whispers, stares, small cruelties that grow because no one stops them. She paused. Until someone gets hurt. A girl in the audience wiped a tear. I warned them, Ayanna continued. Not because I was scared, but because I didn't want anyone to get hurt. Not them, not me, not the dogs that trust me. Her eyes hardened, but power makes people reckless, and privilege makes them blind. There was no anger in her voice, just truth. Raw and precise. I'm not your enemy, she said quietly. The problem isn't dogs or rooftop edges or who pushed who first. Her voice dropped lower, colder. The problem is that some of you think you are untouchable, that your cruelty is justified, that you can strip people of their dignity and still walk away clean. No one dared move. Ayanna stepped back from the podium just slightly. But now you've seen what happens when the truth comes out. When someone fights back, when someone refuses to be your victim. Silence swallowed the room whole. Finally, she closed with a single line so sharp, it left the audience breathless. Silver Ridge can stay the school where people get hurt, or it can become the school where people finally learn. She stepped away from the podium. Principal Green exhaled shakily, realizing he hadn't breathed in nearly a minute. And as Ayanna walked off stage, the auditorium remained frozen in awe, because this moment, the truth spoken aloud would change Silver Ridge forever. The next morning, sunlight washed over the Silver Ridge courtyard in soft gold, a stark contrast to the tension that had filled it only days before. Students gathered in clusters, buzzing with anticipation. Something was happening, something big. At the center of the courtyard, a temporary stage had been set up. A podium, rows of chairs, and a large K9 unit banner fluttering in the breeze. Ayanna stood near the edge of the crowd, her hands tucked into her blazer pockets. She looked like any other student, quiet, collected, except the atmosphere around her told a different story. Students who once whispered or avoided eye contact now stepped aside respectfully as she passed. Some nodded, some simply watched in awe. Then the crowd parted. Major Henderson emerged, leading a procession of uniformed officers. Each officer walked with disciplined precision, and behind them came 3K9S Chaos, Diesel, and Vector wearing polished harnesses with gleaming unit crests. The courtyard erupted in murmurs. "Oh my God, those are the same dogs from the rooftop. They're actually calm? They're walking like bodyguards." Ayanna's breath caught for just a moment, not in fear, but in quiet realization. The last time she'd stood with these dogs in front of a crowd, chaos had surrounded them. Today, they were symbols of triumph. Henderson stepped up onto the stage, adjusting the microphone. "Students of Silver Ridge," he boomed, "we stand here today to acknowledge bravery, courage far beyond what anyone should ever be forced to show." Ayanna kept her gaze lowered, but Henderson wasn't letting her hide. "Lieutenant Brooks," he called. She stiffened automatically at the title. Henderson gestured, front and center. Ayanna stepped forward, her posture straight, her steps measured. Chaos immediately moved to her left side, Diesel to her right, and Vector behind her, forming a protective formation as natural as breathing. A wave of astonishment swept the students. "They're guarding her. They actually treat her like their leader. That's insane." Henderson opened a black case on the podium. Inside was a polished silver medallion engraved with the K9 unit crest. "Today," he said, "we honor Ayanna Brooks for her exceptional bravery, her restraint under deadly pressure, and her continued service to the K9 division. She protected herself without harming her attackers. She maintained control over highly trained animals, and she upheld the ethics of our unit even off-duty." He held the medallion toward her. Ayanna hesitated just a second, then accepted it with both hands. The applause was instant, loud, overwhelming. Students, teachers, officers, everyone rose to their feet. The courtyard thundered with appreciation as Ayanna stood between the 3K9S, each sitting proudly beside her. Chaos nudged her leg softly. Diesel tilted his head up at her. Vector let out a small, approving huff of breath. They weren't just protecting her, they were celebrating her. Ayanna touched the medallion lightly, her chest tightening with something she didn't often allow herself to feel: pride. Not the pride of power, but the pride of surviving, of standing tall, of refusing to break. Henderson placed a hand on her shoulder. "This school needed a lesson," he said quietly, "and you gave it." Ayanna nodded, but her gaze drifted to the students' faces, changed, eyes awakened, whispers different now. Because the real shift, the real victory, it wasn't in the applause, or the recognition, or even the medallion resting in her hand. The greatest transformation was happening inside the students themselves. Silver Ridge High had never felt like this before. In the weeks following the incident, the campus changed not abruptly, but unmistakably, as if the school was slowly waking from a long, collective blindness. Hallways once thick with whispers now held quieter, more cautious conversations. Students who used to shove past others now moved with more intention. Teachers watched more closely, and the old culture of "look the other way" began to crack under the weight of the truth Ayanna had forced into daylight. It started with Principal Green. At a morning assembly, he stood on stage with a seriousness few had seen before. "Silver Ridge will not tolerate cruelty," he announced. "Starting today, we are implementing a comprehensive anti-bullying initiative, one inspired by the courage and leadership of Ayanna Brooks." The auditorium buzzed with surprise. Green continued, "We are forming a student-led task force to educate, prevent, and intervene in cases of harassment, and there is no one more fitting to lead it than the person who showed us what strength truly looks like." He turned to Ayanna. "Miss Brooks, would you accept the role of program ambassador?" Ayanna didn't move for a moment. Responsibility was something she understood. It had shaped her life for years. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was a school, a place she'd simply wanted to blend in, to breathe quietly, to be normal. Yet, looking around at the hopeful eyes, the changed faces, the younger students who now saw her not as a stranger but as a protector, she understood. This was another kind of mission, a gentler one, but no less important. Ayanna nodded. "Yes, sir. I'll do it." Applause rippled through the gym, genuine, warm, grateful. Within days, posters appeared on bulletin boards. The Silver Ridge Safe Initiative, led by Ayanna Brooks. Respect is power. Silence is complicity. Workshops were scheduled. Peer mediation groups formed. Anonymous reporting channels opened. Teachers received new training. The school felt less like a minefield and more like a community learning to mend. Ayanna became a symbol not of fear, but of resilience. Students approached her timidly at first. "Thanks for speaking up. Also, you made things better." "I wish I was that strong." Ayanna always answered the same way. "Strength isn't the point. Protecting each other is." Chaos, Diesel, and Vector became minor celebrities on campus. Officers brought them for demonstration days, letting students learn about discipline, empathy, and the responsibility of handling power. Kids, who once laughed at the idea of training, now watched, awed, as the dogs performed complex maneuvers under Ayanna's guidance. But the biggest shift wasn't in the programs or the posters or the applause. It was in the eyes of the students, how they saw one another differently, how they saw themselves differently. For the first time in years, Silver Ridge looked like a place that could heal. One afternoon, after finishing a workshop in the library, Ayanna packed her things and headed toward the courtyard. The air was calm, the sun warm, and the school felt almost peaceful. Then her phone buzzed. A notification, a message from an unknown number. Ayanna hesitated before opening it. On the screen was a short text, just one line. A line from the last person she ever expected to hear from. "Ayanna, I'm sorry. Carter Hale," because one day, Carter finally sent his final apology. The park behind Silver Ridge High was quiet that afternoon. Golden leaves rustling across the paved path. Sunlight slipping through the branches in soft beams. It was peaceful in a way Ayanna had rarely experienced since the rooftop incident. She sat on a bench facing the pond, Chaos resting at her feet, Diesel stretched out nearby, and Vector standing guard at her side. Her three shadows, her three protectors, her three reminders of who she truly was. She exhaled slowly, enjoying the rare stillness, until footsteps crunched on gravel behind her. Ayanna didn't turn. The dogs reacted first. Chaos lifted his head, ears flicking forward. Diesel stood instantly, tail stiff, posture alert. Vector stepped closer to Ayanna, placing himself partially between her and the approaching presence. Ayanna finally looked over her shoulder. Carter Hale stood several feet away, not swaggering, not smirking, not armored with arrogance or entitlement. He looked like a collapsed version of himself, shoulders hunched, eyes hollow, hands trembling slightly, as if he weren't sure whether to speak or run. Ayanna didn't move. Carter swallowed hard. I didn't know you'd actually come." "I didn't come for you," Ayanna replied calmly. "I come here every day." That stung. but he nodded as if he deserved it, and he did. He took one step closer. Diesel growled. Carter froze. Ayanna snapped her fingers once, sharp and precise. Diesel immediately sat, though his gaze never left Carter. Carter wet his lips, voice strained. "Look, I didn't ask you here to make excuses. I'm not here to blame you or twist the story or pretend anything." Ayanna said nothing. He forced the words out. "I'm here because I can't sleep. I can't stop hearing you hit the ground. I can't stop seeing those dogs freeze. I can't stop thinking about how close I came to," his voice cracked, "to killing you." Ayanna's expression didn't soften. She didn't offer him comfort or pity. "Good," she said simply. Carter blinked. "Good?" "Yes," she replied. "It means you're finally feeling something real." The wind rustled through the trees, scattering leaves across the path. Carter looked down at his shoes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know it doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't change what I did. But I needed to say it, even if you don't accept it." Ayanna studied him. Really studied him for the first time. She saw the guilt, the shame, the fear, but none of it was enough to undo what he'd done. Finally, she stood. Chaos and Diesel rose with her. Vector moved closer, ready at her flank. Ayanna stepped forward, not toward Carter, but past him. As she passed, she said quietly but firmly, "I don't need your forgiveness." Carter's breath hitched. Ayanna stopped beside him, turning her head just enough for their eyes to meet. "I need you to change. No accusation, no anger, just truth, blunt, sharp, immovable." Carter nodded slowly, tears finally slipping down his cheeks. "I will," he murmured. "I promise." Ayanna didn't respond. She didn't need to. She gave a sharp whistle. Chaos, Diesel, and Vector instantly fell into formation around her left, right, and behind like the elite unit they were. Ayanna walked forward, head high, steps steady, strong, self-possessed, unshakable. And as she disappeared down the sunlit path, the dogs marching in perfect sync beside her, one truth became clear. She hadn't just survived. She had risen powerful, controlled, and entirely her own. And just like that, the girl they tried to break became the one they could never escape. Ayanna didn't need revenge. Her truth, her training, and her control over those K9s were enough to flip their entire world upside down. Carter and his crew learned the hard way that power isn't about who screams the loudest. It's about who stays standing when the dust settles. So now I'm asking you, after seeing how everything unfolded, who do you think was the real danger from the very beginning, Ayanna, or the boys who underestimated her? Drop your thoughts below. And hey, if this story hooked you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next jaw-dropping twist.